Hey guys, what's up? It's Kyle here. Giving you a list of my top 10 favorite wrestling video games of all time. I've owned every single wrestling video game you can think of, from the Nintendo 64 and PS1 era, all the way to, well, Xbox 360 and PS3 era. Every wrestling game I've owned. So, very hard for me to compose this list, at least of a top 10, but I tried my best, and so I think it's a pretty good top 10 list, at least for me, my favorite top 10 list. So starting at number 10 is my favorite wrestling video game of all time. It is a tie between WWF Attitude and WCW's Nitro. Excuse me. WWF Attitude was the sequel to WWF Warzone, which was a horrible game, but probably one of the worst wrestling games of all time. But WWF Attitude was a bit better than WWF Warzone. The controls were still kind of arcadey-like, and where you have to do just multiple combos just to do a simple throwing someone against the ring ropes. Absolutely ridiculous. Graphics weren't bad during that time. They're okay. Very blocky though. WWF Attitude was okay. Not one of the greatest wrestling games ever. Reason why too, but the reason why a lot of you guys may say, well, why put it in your top 10 list? Well, it's because the reason I put it on my top 10 list is because, well, it was the first wrestling game I owned ever, besides the WCW Nitro. Now with WCW Nitro, I thought was a really fun game. I had more fun playing that than I did WWF Attitude. The controls were not as complex as Attitude. The graphics were probably not as good, but it gave Attitude a good competition. It wasn't as blocky as Attitude was, the characters at least. It had a pretty good solid roster from what I remember too. So WCW Nitro and WWF Attitude are tied at number 10. Number 9 is the Legends of WrestleMania. Legends of WrestleMania I thought was a really good game. How you get to relive some of the most and basically pretty much you actually get to play out some of the most historic moments and matches in WrestleMania history, from WrestleMania 3 to WrestleMania, I think like 10 or 12 and 14 and 15. So really some of the greatest WrestleMania matches of all time. They had like all the classic characters like Ultimate Warrior, Andre the Giant, Hulk Hogan, Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, and Bret Hart, and pretty much everyone you can think of. And the cool thing about this is that if you had Smackdown vs. Raw 2008, you could transfer the Smackdown 2008 entire roster during that time and have them play against the wrestlers from Legends of WrestleMania, which I really liked. I like that concept. It was like wrestlers of the past meet wrestlers of today. And I enjoyed this concept a lot more than WWE All Stars, which is just completely stupid. I mean, it's a wrestling game, but it's a fighting wrestling game. Stupid. And the character design is just awful. Number 8 is favorite wrestling video game of all time. It's a WWF Smackdown Shut Your Mouth. This was the first wrestling game. I think it's the first wrestling. Yeah, this was the first wrestling game that was in the 2000s that had updated graphics, made by THQ. Shut Your Mouth was good. It was definitely, I think, in my opinion, the first real good SmackDown heading, in the right direction. So Shut Your Mouth is number 8 for me. Number 7 is WWF No Mercy for the N64. Hands down, also goes in pretty much anyone who's played live wrestling games, like when they first came out. No Mercy was also one of the greatest wrestling games of all time. I'll probably say tied with this was WWE Judgment Day, which came off of the GameCube. I liked the Judgment Day. Judgment Day, I think, was the last probably good story-developed video game from THQ. So, No Mercy is number 7. WWF No Mercy for the N64. Number 6 on my list is WWE Raw 2, which came out for the original Xbox. Excuse me. WWE Raw 2 got horrible reviews from various game reviewers and video game players alike. I actually liked Raw 2. Raw 2 to me, along with its SmackDown counterpart during this time, which is also on the same list. Raw 2 had a phenomenal roster. I still think that's the best wrestling game. That's the best roster ever. Hulk Hogan, Goldberg, The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Scott Hall, and Kevin Nash, and Booker T, and Matt Hardy, and just had a really good roster. The story mode wasn't bad. I don't think it wasn't as good as the SmackDown counterpart, but it wasn't as bad either. And the graphics during that time, the graphics I thought were really good. I thought the graphics were better than, once again, its SmackDown counterpart. But controls were what a lot of people complain about the controls, so they're kind of clunky. I don't think so. The controls were decent to me. Not as good as SmackDown, but the controls were still good. I kind of wish that THQ would have made a WWE Raw and then a SmackDown game separately. I just wish they would have done that again. But Raw 2 is my favorite game. Number 5 is WWE 12. This is the latest wrestling game in the series. Love the new Predator technology. I love the Universe Mode version 2.0. Much better than the first, and it gives you a higher replay value for that. The difficulty level is definitely stepped up. Love the difficulty of the AI. Although the AI still acts kind of stupid at times, but still, just a great game. And what's funny is that a lot of stuff that THQ says, though, that's new in WWE 12, really isn't new. They've actually taken from Raw 2 from the Xbox, and they just updated it on WWE 12. But a lot of people might not know that if they've never played Raw 2 or anything else. So, number 5 is WWE 12. Number 4, favorite wrestling game of all time, is WWE. Well, not WWE, but ECW Enter Key Rules. This game was freaking awesome. This game came out from PlayStation 1 and Sega Dreamcast. Enter Key Rules was made by Acclaim Games, which was the same company that made WWF Warzone, and I think Attitude they made as well. But ECW Enter Key Rules was awesome. Much better than ECW Hardcore Revolution, which a lot of people complain controls were like Warzone. But they changed it up with Anarchy. Anarchy I thought was good. Had a much better compelling career mode. Really good, pretty good roster, to represent the ECW. And this came out in 2000. Awesome for the Dreamcast. I think this is still to this day, Anarchy Rules is still the only wrestling game to this day that's rated M for mature. Very hard to find for anyone who wants to play it on the Dreamcast or PS1, and unless you hack it for PlayStation, and even then, it's kind of hard to find to hack it for PlayStation 1. My number 3 favorite wrestling video game of all time is tied between the very first 2 WWF Smackdown. It's WWF Smackdown and WWF Smackdown 2 Know Your Role. Both games coming out in 2000. Well, actually, I think the WWF Smackdown, came out in 1999. Know Your Role, Smackdown 2, came out, I think, like 8 months later, which ended up being in the year 2000. But these games were awesome. This was the first, actually, this wasn't the first game really with THQ, because THQ had done, I think, WWF Attitude. I think that was the first game they did, and since they've been with WWE. But this is really one of the very first early games that THQ had made with WWE. That's been really, really good. I loved Smackdown, the very first Smackdown that came out, and Smackdown 2, Know Your Role. Not really much of a big difference between Know Your Role and the original Smackdown, other than they they made some few changes and tweaks to the career mode. They've changed a bit, and they've added a few new characters to the roster. And they've changed like certain gameplay, but not much of a huge difference between SmackDown and SmackDown 2. So if you had one and didn't have the other, it really didn't matter that much. My number 2 favorite wrestling video game of all time is WCW Mayhem. This was the best WCW game ever. This game was better than Nitro. This game was better than WCW NWO Thunder. This is better than WCW versus NWO. This was better than WCW versus the World. This was better than WCW Revenge. This was the best WCW game of all time. This game was made by Electronic Arts, which is a studio game company that specializes in computer video games. But this is the actual first crack at a wrestling video game, and this game was awesome. It was just so far ahead of its time when it came out, and this came out in 1999, I think, was when Mayhem came out. Mayhem came out for the N64 and PS1. The reason why this game was so far ahead of its time in terms of wrestling games is because Mayhem was the first wrestling game that had all 12 pay-per-views in the game that you can play on. It was the first wrestling game that not only had all 12 original pay-per-views, but also the weekly shows, Nitro and Thunder, as well as it was also the very first wrestling game to use real-life commentary from the real broadcasters from the Monday Nitro show. And like I said, this was in 1999, and THQ had already had rights to WWE video games in 1998, and they didn't put commentary into their video games until 2004, Smackdown vs. Raw, the first Smackdown vs. Raw 2004. That's the only thing they put commentary in, but during that time they couldn't think of it to put commentary in a video game. But Electric Arts, these guys are smart enough to do it. This is the best WCW game to me ever. Even better than Nitro. And that's not even saying much because THQ made Nitro and Thunder. And yes, for all you guys who don't know, before THQ made a long line of WWE video games, they made WCW games first. WCW was their games they made first before they made WWE. And they were going to make WCW Mayhem 2, but unfortunately that didn't last because WCW got bought out by WWE in 2000. So that was unfortunate, but it is what it is. Still one of the best wrestling games of all time. If I had a PS1, I'd still play it now. My number 1 favorite wrestling game of all time, which is pretty much the favorite for everyone, and that is WWE Smackdown, Here Comes the Pain. This game was freaking awesome. The graphics were amazing. Raw 2 came out at the exact same time as Here Comes the Pain. Here Comes the Pain had a much better gameplay, and the roster was the same, really, minus a few wrestlers from Raw 2, but the roster was solid. The gameplay was awesome. And like I said, the thing that made Here Comes the Pain shine so much was the story. And I think one of the reasons why it made it shine so much is because the same people who made the story for the career mode and Here Comes the Pain were made from real WWE writers. And so, the writers during that time, back in that 2002, 2003 era in WWE was still a hot show. So to have real writers who still wrote, good stories and stuff on SmackDown and Raw, and during that 2003 to 2004 mark, to have, those writers write an actual story in career mode for a video game, it felt pretty cool because it was like having a piece of WWE creative in your own home, on your console, and you're playing it, like for real. So that's one of the things I really enjoyed so much about Here Comes the Pain. The roster was good. The graphics were, I thought, really, really well. Good. Step up from Know Your Role and Shut Your Mouth. Well, Shut Your Mouth, really, a step up from that. And even still to this day, although the graphics aren't on par with the WWE 12, I think it's still pretty decent graphics to be, a game that's like 8 years old. The graphics are still pretty decent and look good to me. So this is just my top 10 favorite wrestling video games of all time. Are any of these games, have you guys played before? Are they on your list? Are they not on your list? Let me know what you guys' favorite wrestling games are that I have not mentioned that's on this list. Put it down in the comments below. Subscribe. Peace.